Dub, as we get closer and closer to tee time in Augusta, I think one of the most entertaining stories that is out there is the mad genius that is DeChambeau. Bryson, we have no idea what exactly he's going to look like. And I don't know, Dub, if you saw the video, but there was a video of him on the practice range.
I saw it.
Just hammering.
It was unbelievable.
Just absolute. When I watched that video, Vijay Singh was standing beside him, in disbelief. And when I saw that, I thought to myself, have they sped up the video, or is he actually swinging that fast and that hard? And they're like, no, that's real. And so I love this guy. I like when people disrupt, sort of staid organizations. And it certainly is the case that DeChambeau's like the guy who shows up at the normal kind of quiet pool party and just decides to run and do a cannonball in, right? Like everybody else is kind of swimming around quietly, it's just if you've ever been to one of those pool parties where nobody's actually in the water and everybody's kind of just standing around the edge of the pool party, and then DeChambeau is just going to jump in and there's a huge there's a splash that goes everywhere. That seems to be like him right now.
Well, he's the scene in Caddyshack where all the caddies get to go to the pool for 15 minutes, right?
Yeah.
And they are just totally disrupting everybody's peaceful, quiet time. But you're right. The way he's swinging the club in that video clip, he looks like one of the long drive competitors. He is literally swinging as hard as he can, and his swing speed is just off the charts, even compared to the tour pros. It's unbelievable. Now, do I think he's going to be swinging like that in the actual tournament? Probably not, but you can't totally rule it out. I mean, there's some par fives at Augusta National that are totally gettable. 13 in particular, if he turns the corner on the par 5 13th and hits one good and hits it in the fairway, I mean, he could have 100 yards into a par 5. That is totally possible.
What's wild about this to me, the wildest I would say, is he's now moved up to the co-favorite at FanDuel alongside of Dustin Johnson. And let me mention this to everybody out there. We've been mentioning it all week long. Right now, if you go to FanDuel.com/Clay and you bet on Jordan Spieth, on Rory McIlroy, and or on Dustin Johnson, you pick one of them to make the cut, then you get back $100. That's a 20-1 payout. A $5 bet turns into $100. That is a tremendous value. And I'd encourage everybody to go to FanDuel.com/Clay. You got about an hour left until tee time begins to be able to get that bet in if you are able to. FanDuel.com/Clay. So you are bullish on the Bryson DeChambeau hype that has now led him to the co-favorite alongside of Dustin Johnson right now at FanDuel to win the Masters this weekend.
Well, you say hype, but when you think back to November when last year's Masters was played, the hype was truly off the charts. It was the only thing people were talking about. I think he was 6-1 to win in November, which was just totally ridiculous, and he barely made the cut. Now, I don't know if you'll remember this, but one of his tee shots, I believe it was on the third hole early in the week, he hits the ball, it lands in the rough, but they just never found the ball. It got embedded into the ground, basically buried itself because he hit it so hard and high that they never found the ball. He ended up making triple bogey there. So that was one of the worst breaks I've ever seen on a golf course. But this year, he's got another year under his belt. And I mentioned yesterday, the Augusta National is the course where experience matters the most and your past results matter the most. I really could see him being there on Sunday afternoon. I didn't personally bet him, but if he's getting the green jacket put on him by Dustin Johnson on Sunday evening, I would not be surprised one bit.
It's interesting, too, because I think he's great for golf, right? Because polarization, whether people want to believe it or not, conflict is the reason why we consume most content. And some of you are out there and you're wrinkling your faces. You're like, what are you talking about? Conflict is what is the fuel for virtually every story that exists in the world. And let me explain what I mean. You wouldn't watch a superhero movie if there wasn't an arch enemy of that superhero competing against him. Superman without Lex Luthor is a pretty boring dude. Batman without the Joker doesn't really have a lot of sizzle or sex appeal. Right now, who is a villain in golf? Right? I think Bryson, there's not a lot of great villains in sports in general because all these athletes have gotten so wussified because of their social media. They're afraid of the comments that they'll get and the mean things that people might say about them. Wrestling, and actually we're going to talk to The Miz. I'm going to WrestleMania this weekend. I love wrestling because there's a heel. There's a guy who is willing to play the role of bad guy, and they do it so well. It used to exist in sports all the time, right? Like if you go back and think about it, Reggie Miller was a great heel. Charles Barkley was willing to be a great heel. Rick Mahorn. Remember Rick Mahorn? Everybody hated Rick Mahorn. Relatively speaking, a lot of those hateable stars don't really exist now. Bill Laimbeer, his entire campaign was predicated on being hated. In fact, the entire Detroit Pistons were willing to be the bad guy to Michael Jordan's good guy in many ways. And I feel like DeChambeau, he may be a great dude. I know nothing about him. I don't have any personal relationship with very many golfers. But I feel like he's leaning into that villain role. Don't you feel like that a little bit? Like, and maybe villain is the wrong phrase exactly, but he's definitely leaning into the idea of being a mad scientist.
Oh, well, there's no doubt. And when you think of the sport of golf in general, change is not really a word that comes to the top of the list. You know, it takes a while for the style to adjust and so on. But there's two guys really not named Tiger Woods, and I'm not comparing these two guys to Tiger Woods in the sense of them moving the needle. But Bryson DeChambeau and Jordan Spieth right now are the two guys that people who don't typically watch golf are tuning in to watch this weekend because Bryson DeChambeau is hitting the ball further than we've ever seen a player at this level hit the ball. And Jordan Spieth is back from a 4-year hiatus, coming to a course where he's won in the past and come awfully close a couple other times. Without those two guys, this week, I'm not sure there's a ton of interest in this tournament at all from the casual
in general,
fan.
Because Tiger provokes a lot of reaction. Most people, I think, are Tiger fans, but he still provokes a lot of reaction. Are people really strongly allied one way or the other with the Rory McIlroys and the Justin Thomases and the Xander Schauffele's and the, I just don't feel like there's anybody. Sergio had a little bit of a villain component to him, right, where people were willing to believe negative things about him. But there aren't that many, sort of golfers who are comfortable wearing the black hat at all.
Well, there's one in particular, and that's Patrick Reed. There's a lot of people.
Everybody hates Patrick Reed.
But it's hard to be a true villain. I mean, it sounds weird to say.
But do people really like Patrick Reed?
That's what I'm about to say.
Too?
Like, there's really nobody that likes Patrick Reed. Like 80 to 90 to maybe 95% of golf fans just really don't like the guy because he's had cheating scandals in his past, which is a big no-no for golf, obviously. And we had something like that occur just a couple months ago at a tournament that he ended up winning by 5 strokes. But there's just not a whole lot likable about the guy.
Yeah, and I think that kind of ties in with a lot of times if you're a good villain, you have a certain fan base for you, right? But by which I mean that you may be unlikable, but you're so unlikable that people start to respect the swagger that you play with. And I don't feel like that's true with Patrick Reed. I do feel like it could be true with DeChambeau.
Yeah, he's changing the game. And look, I'm kind of on the fence with DeChambeau. There's been moments where I really just don't care for him, but he's growing on me. I have to admit, over the past basically 6 months, he's really grown on me, and I don't have a problem with it. And I think he's good for the game.